Hi, sorry about that. This is where we left off. It seems like every phone in the house had to ring at once. Okay. Um, let's see. But you don't like that those beastly giants are eating humans every night, do you? Sophie asked. I do not, the BFG said. One right is not making two lefts. Is you quite cozy down there in my pocket? I'm fine, Sophie said. Then suddenly, once again, the BFG went into that magical top gear of his, and he began hurtling forward with phenomenal leaps. His speed was unbelievable. The landscape became blurred, and again Sophie had to duck down out of the whistling gale to save her head from being blown clean off her shoulders. She crouched in the pocket and listened to the wind screaming past. It came knifing in through the tiny peephole and whooshed around her like a hurricane. But this time the BFG didn't stay in top gear long. It seemed as though he had some barrier to cross, a vast mountain perhaps, or an ocean, or a great desert. But having crossed it, he slowed down to his normal gallop, and Sophie was able to pop her head up and look out once more at the view. She noticed immediately that they were now in an altogether paler country. The sun had disappeared above a film of vapor, the air was becoming cooler, the land was flat and treeless, and there seemed to be no color in it at all. Every minute the mist became thicker, the air became colder still, and everything became paler and paler until soon there was nothing but gray and white all around them. They were in a country of swirling mists and ghostly vapors. There was some sort of grass underfoot, but it was not green. It was ashy gray. There was no sign of a living creature and no sound at all except for the soft thud of the BFG's footsteps as he hurtled on through the fog. And suddenly he stopped. "We is here at last," he announced, and he bent down and lifted Sophie from his pocket and put her on the ground. And she was still in her nightie and her feet were bare, and she shivered and stared around her at the swirling mists and ghostly vapors. "Where are we?" she asked. "We is in dream country," the BFG said. "This is where all dreams is beginning." All right, this next chapter is called Dream Catching. The big friendly giant put the suitcase on the ground. He bent down low so that his enormous face was close to Sophie's. "From now on, we is keeping as still as winky little miceies," he whispered. Sophie nodded. The misty vapor swirled around her. It made her cheeks damp and left dewdrops in her hair. The BFG opened the suitcase and took out several empty glass jars. He set them ready on the ground with their screw tops removed. Then he stood up very straight. His head was now high up in the swirling mist, and it kept disappearing, then appearing again. He was holding the long net in his right hand. Sophie, staring upwards, saw through the mist that his colossal ears were beginning to swivel out from his head. They began waving gently to and fro, and suddenly the BFG bounced. He leaped high in the air and swung the net through the mist with a great swishing sweep of his arm. "Got him!" he cried. "A jar! Quick, quick!" Sophie picked up a jar and held it up to him. He grabbed hold of it, he lowered the net, and very carefully he tipped something absolutely invisible from the net into the jar. He dropped the net and swiftly clapped one hand over the jar. "The top," he whispered. The jar top, quick! And Sophie picked up the screw top and handed it to him, and he screwed it on tight, and the jar was closed. The BFG was excited. He held the jar close to one ear and listened intently. And here's a picture of the BFG catching a dream in his dream catching net. "It's a wink squiffler," he whispered with a thrill in his voice. It's even better. It's a fizz wizard. It's a golden fizz wizard." Sophie stared at him. Oh my," he said, holding the jar in front of him. "This will be giving some little toddler a very happy night when I is blowing it in." "Is it a really good one?" Sophie asked. "A good one!" he cried. "It's a golden fizz wizard. It is not often I is getting one of these." And he handed the jar to Sophie and said, "Please be still as a starfish now. I is thinking there may be a whole swarm of fizz wizards up here there today. And do kindly stop breathing. You is terribly noisy down there." "I haven't moved a muscle," Sophie said. "Then don't," the BFG answered sharply. And once again he stood up tall in the mist, holding his net at the ready. Then came the long silence, the waiting, the listening, and at last With surprising suddenness came the leap and swish of the net. "Another jar!" he cried. "Quick, quick, quick!" And when the second dream was safely in the jar and the top was screwed down, the BFG held it to his ear. "Oh, no!" he cried. "Oh, mince my maggots! Oh, swipe my swoggles!" "Oh, what's the matter?" Sophie asked. "It's a Trogglehumper!" he shouted. His voice was filled with fury and anguish. "Oh, save our solos!" he cried. "Deliver us from weasels! The devil is dancing on my dibbler!" "What are you talking about?" Sophie said. The BFG was getting more distressed every minute. "Oh, bash my eye bones!" he cried, waving the jar in the air. "I come all this way to get lovely golden dreams, and what is I catching?" "What are you catching?" Sophie said. "I is catching a frightsome Trogglehumper!" he cried. "That is a bad, bad dream. It is worse than a bad dream. It is a nightmare." "Oh, dear," Sophie said. "Well, what will you do with that?" "I's never letting it go," the BFG cried. "If I do, then some poor little toddler will be having the most curd-bloodling time. This one is a real Kixie bog thumper. I is exploding it as soon as I get home." "Nightmares are horrible," Sophie said. "I had one once and I woke up sweating all over." "Well, with this one you would be waking up screaming all over," the BFG said. "This one would make your teeth stand on end, and if this one got into you, your blood would be freezing to icicles and your skin would go creeping across the floor." "Is it as bad as that?" "It's worse!" cried the BFG. "This is a real wopsy grop switcher." "You said it was a Trogglehumper," Sophie told him. "It is a Trogglehumper!" cried the exasperated BFG. "But it is also a bog thumper and a grop switcher. It is all three riddled into one. Oh, I is so glad I is clutching it tight. Ah, you wicked beastie, you!" he cried, holding up the jar and staring into it. "Never more is you going to be bunk-doodling the poor little human beanie toddlers." Sophie, who was staring into the glass jar, cried, "I can see it! There's something in there." "Of course there is something in there," the BFG said. "You is looking at a frightsome Trogglehumper." "But you told me dreams are invisible." "They is always invisible until they is captured," the BFG told her. "After that they is losing a little of their invisibility. We is seeing this one quite clearly." And there's Sophie staring into the jar of the Trogglehumper dream. Inside the jar, Sophie could see the faint scarlet outline of something that looked like a mixture between a blob of gas and a bubble of jelly. It was moving violently, thrashing against the sides of the jar and forever changing shape. "It's wiggling all over the place," Sophie cried. "It's fighting to get out or it'll bash itself to bits." "The nastier the dream, the angrier it is getting when it is imprisoned," the BFG said. "It is the same with wild animals. If an animal is very fierce and you is putting it in a cage, it will make a tremendous rumpeldumpus. If it is a nice animal like a cockatoodle-doo or a froggle-frump, it will sit quietly. Dreams is exactly the same. This one is a nasty, fierce, bog-rotting nightmare. Just look at him splishing himself all over the glass." "It's quite frightening," Sophie cried. "I would be hating to get this one inside me on a darksome night," the BFG said. "So would I," Sophie said. The BFG started putting the bottles back into the suitcase. "Is that all?" Sophie asked. "Are we going?" "I is so upset by this Troggle-humping, bog-thumping grop switcher," the BFG said, "that I is not wishing to go on. Dream catching is finished for today." Soon Sophie was back in the vest pocket, and the BFG was racing home as fast as he could go. When at last they emerged out of the mist and came again to the hot yellow wasteland, all the other giants were sprawled on the ground, fast asleep. Well, what do you do with a bad dream like this? Well, let's see what the BFG does. This next chapter, and this last one for today, is called A Trogglehumper for the Flesh Lump Eater. They is always having 50 winks before they go scumpering off to hunt human beings in the evening, the BFG said, and he stopped for a few moments to let Sophie have a better look. "Giants is only sleeping every now and then," he said. "Not nearly as much as human beings. Human beings is crazy for sleeping. Is it ever occurring to you that a human being who is 50 is spending about 20 years sleeping fast?" I must admit that never occurred to me, Sophie said. You should allow it to occur to you, the BFG said. Imagine it, please. This human being who says he is 50 has been fast asleep for 20 years and is not even knowing where he is, not even doing anything, not even thinking. It's a funny thought, Sophie said. Exactly, the BFG said. So what I is trying to explain to you is that a human being who says he is 50 is not 50. He is only 30. Well, what about me, Sophie said. I am 8. You is not 8 at all, the BFG said. Human being babies and little chidlers is spending half their time sleeping, so you is only 4. I'm 8, Sophie said. You may think you is 8, the BFG said, but you has only spent 4 years of your life with your little eyes open. You is only 4, and please stop higgling me. Titchy little snapper whippers like you should not be higgling around with an old sage and onions who is hundreds of years more than you. How much do giants sleep? Sophie asked. They's never wasting much time snozzling, the BFG said. 2 or 3 hours is enough. Well, when do you sleep? Sophie asked. Even less, the BFG answered. I is sleeping only once in a blue baboon. Sophie, peeping out from her pocket, examined the 9 sleeping giants. They looked even more grotesque now than when they were awake. Sprawled out across the yellow plain, they covered an area about the size of a football field, and most of them were lying on their backs with their enormous mouths wide open, and they were snoring like foghorns. The noise was awful. Suddenly, the BFG gave a jump in the air. By gum frog, he cried. I is just having the most wopsy whiffling idea. What? Sophie said. Wait, he cried. Hold your horse feathers, keep your skirt on. Just you wait to see what I is going to bring about. And he galloped off as fast to his cave, with Sophie hanging on tight to the rim of the pocket. He rolled back the stone. He entered the cave. He was very excited. He was moving quickly. You stay where you is in my pocket, Huggy Bee, he said. We is doing this lovely little bit of buck swashling both together. And he laid aside the dream-catching net, but hung onto the suitcase. He ran across to the other side of the cave and grabbed the long trumpet thing, the one he had been carrying when Sophie had first seen him in the village. And with the suitcase in one hand and the trumpet in the other, he dashed out of the cave. What is he up to now? Sophie wondered. Peep your head up good, the BFG said. Then you will get a fine winkle of what is going on. And when the BFG came near to the sleeping giants, he slowed his pace. He began moving softly. He crept on to his toes toward the ugly brutes. They were still snoring loudly. They looked repulsive, filthy, diabolical. The BFG tiptoed around them. He went past the gizzard gulper, the blood bottler, the meat dripper, the child chewer. Then he stopped. He had reached the flesh lump eater. He had pointed at him, and he looked down at Sophie and gave her a big wink. He knelt on the ground, and very quietly he opened the suitcase. He took out of it the glass jar containing the terrible, nightmarish Trogglehumper. At that point, Sophie guessed what was going to happen next. Ouch, she thought. This could be rather dangerous, and she crouched lower in the pocket so that only the top of her head and her eyes were showing. She wanted to be ready to duck out of sight very fast should anything go wrong. They were about 20 feet away from the flesh lump eater's face. The snoring, snorting noise he was making was disgusting. Every now and again a big bubble of spit formed between his 2 open lips, and then it would burst with a splash and cover his face with saliva. Taking infinite care, the BFG unscrewed the top of the glass jar, and he tipped the squiggly, squirming, faintly scarlet Trogglehumper into the wide end of his long trumpet. He put the other end of the trumpet to his lips. He aimed the instrument directly at the flesh lump eater's face. He took a deep breath, puffed out his cheeks, and then, whoosh, he blew. Sophie saw. This is a great picture of the BFG blowing the Trogglehumper into the face of the flesh lump eater while he's sleeping. Sophie saw a flash of pale red go darting toward the giant's face, and for a split second it hovered above the face. Then it was gone. It seemed to have been sucked up the giant's nose, but it all happened so quickly Sophie couldn't be sure. We had better be skittling away quick to where it is safe, the BFG whispered, and he trotted off for about 100 yards, and then he stopped, and he crouched low to the earth. Now, he said, we is waiting for the gun and flames to begin. They didn't have to wait long. The air was suddenly pierced by the most fearful roar Sophie had ever heard, and she saw the flesh lump eater's body, all 54 feet of it, rise up off the ground and fall back again with a thump. Then it began to wiggle and twist and bounce about in the most violent fashion. It was quite frightening to watch. "Yow!" roared the flesh lump eater. "Ow! Ooh!" "He's still asleep," the BFG whispered. "The terrible troggle-humping nightmare is beginning to hit him." "Serves him right," Sophie said, and she could feel no sympathy for this great brute who ate children as though they were sugar lumps. "Save us!" screamed the flesh lump eater, thrashing about madly. "He is after me! He is getting me!" The thrashing of legs and the waving of arms became more violent by the second. It was an awesome thing to watch, such a massive creature having such a mighty convulsion. "It's Jack!" bellowed the flesh lump eater. "It's the gruesome, grunchious Jack! Jack is after me! Jack is rat crackling me! Jack is spike sticking me! Jack is splash splunking me! It is the horrible, fright swiping Jack!" The flesh lump eater was writhing about over the ground like some colossal, tortured snake. "Oh, spare me, Jack!" he yelled. "Don't hurt me, Jack!" "Who is this Jack he's going on about?" Sophie whispered. "Oh, Jack is the only human being all Giants is frightened of," the BFG told her. "They is all absolutely terrified of Jack. They is all hearing of Jack is a famous giant killer." "Save me!" screamed the flesh lump eater. "Have mercy on this poor little giant. The beanstalk, he is coming at me with his terrible spike-sticking beanstalk. Take it away! I is begging you, Jack. I is praying you do not touch me with your terrible spike-sticking beanstalk." "Us giants," the BFG whispered, "is not knowing very much about this dreaded human being called Jack. We is knowing only that he is a famous giant killer and that he is owning something called a beanstalk. We is knowing also that beanstalks is a fearsome thing and Jack is using it to kill giants." Sophie could not stop smiling. "What is you griggling at?" the BFG asked her, slightly nettled. "I'll tell you later on," Sophie said. The awful nightmare had now gripped the great brute to such an extent that he was tying his whole body into knots. "Do not do it, Jack!" he screeched. "I was not eating you, Jack. I is never eating human beings. I swear I has never gobbled a single human being in all my wholesome life." "Liar," the BFG said. Just then one of the flesh lump eater's flailing fists caught the still fast asleep, meat-dripping giant smack in the mouth. At the same time, one of his furiously thrashing legs kicked the snoring, gizzard-gulping giant right in the guts, and both the giants woke up and leaped to their feet. "He is swiping me in the mouth," yelled the meat-dripper. "He is bung-swaggling me smack in the guts," shouted the gizzard-gulper. The two of them rushed at the flesh lump eater and began pounding him with their fists and feet. The wretched flesh lump eater woke up with a bang. He woke straight from one nightmare into another. He roared into battle, and in the following thumping rough and tumble that followed, one sleeping giant after another got either stepped upon or kicked, and soon all 9 of them were on their feet, having the most almighty free-for-all. And here's a picture of Sophie and the BFG watching the giants fight. Kind of like the BFG's face, don't you? He looks very kind. And here is a picture of the man-eating giants having a good go-to on each other. They punched and kicked and scratched and bit and butted each other as hard as they could. Blood flowed, noses went crunch, teeth fell out like hailstones. The giants roared and screamed and cursed, and for many minutes the noise of battle rolled across the yellow plain. The BFG smiled, a big, wide smile of absolute pleasure. "I is loving it when they is all having a good toughin' rumble," he said. "They'll kill each other," Sophie said. "Never," the BFG answered. "Those beasts is always bishing and walloping at one another. Soon it will be getting dusky and they will be galloping off to fill their tummies." "They're coarse and foul and filthy," Sophie said. "I hate them." As the BFG headed back to the cave, he said quietly, "We certainly was putting that nightmare to good use, though, wasn't we?" "Excellent," Sophie said. "Well done, you." Well, that's where we're going to leave off. And next week, you've got to tune in, because next week
the giant opens jars on his wall, the walls in his cave, and Sophie gets to find out what some of these dreams are. And it's a marvelous, marvelous chapter. I know you will love. Okay, we're done with the recording. I want you to go look at the assignment because you need to think about Fizzwizard dreams and Trogglehumper dreams, and you're going to choose one to write about. Bye-bye.